Hi everybody, this is Gil with Smile Designer Pro, and in this video we're going to walk through the design of our sample case step by step, and we're going to create our treatment plan and the before and after simulation for this case. So let's get started. The first step in our case design is orienting the natural smile photo so that it's straight. And in this rotation calibration step, we're going to basically position the midline and position these lines at points on the face that on average should be symmetric. You can use just one of these lines, or you can use more than one. I like to just use the one line on the pupils, and as you can see, if I click and hold, or on your iPad tap and hold on a control point, you get this nice magnifier and you can really position things accurately. And once I position the line on those points that should be symmetric, on the bottom of the screen there I click calibrate, and what this does is it rotates the photo so that the line is horizontal, and if I use more than one line, it rotates the photo so the average of the lines is horizontal. And if I want to make adjustments to the rotation, I have these controls at the top of the screen, and I can fine-tune the rotation, or I could just do it manually from the start. These calibration lines are really just a tool to help you figure out what the right rotation is on the photo. Once I'm happy with it, I'm going to hit the check mark button here. And now I'm on the next calibration step. Now here we need to set up a correspondence between the retracted and the natural smile pictures. And the way we're going to do that is very simple. We're going to use these calibration lines to mark out 2 points that we know are visible in both photos. So first I'm going to mark out the points on the retracted picture, and now I'm going to hit the check mark, and I see the natural smile picture, and I just need to mark out the same 2 points. And once I've done that, I can actually check the fit by using the slider at the top of the screen. So the slider lets you fade between the retracted picture and the natural smile picture. And if I leave the slider part way, it's sort of a blend between the two, and I can fine-tune the positioning in order to get an even better match. And once I'm happy with that, I hit the check mark button. Now I'm on the last calibration step, and this is just determining the scale calibration and basically providing the software with a mapping from pixels in the photo to millimeters in real world units. So in order to do this, you need to take one measurement on the model or on the patient. Usually we use the width of the centrals, but you can also use the width of just one central or the length. And at the top of the screen here, you have a slider that lets you specify how many millimeters this virtual caliper represents in real world distance. So in this case, I set it to 16 millimeters, and I can use these arrow buttons to step up and down by 0.1 millimeters. And once I'm done, I hit the checkmark button, and now I'm in the main editor and I'm ready to start designing the case. So if you ever need to go back to the gallery or to the other rotation and other calibration steps, you're going to want to use this little hamburger icon at the top left of the screen, and when you click on that, it gives you the navigation menu. So you see we're on the design editor step, and we just stepped through all these calibration steps, but we could jump back to them at any time. And if we want to work on a different case, we would go back to the case gallery and create a new one. And when this design is ready, we'll jump to the export step to save out a picture. So now we'll start designing the case, and the first thing we want to do is set up our guides. So in order to pan the view around, what I'm doing is I'm holding the spacebar key to turn the cursor into this hand, and when I click and drag, it moves around. On the iPad, you'll just be using your two-finger gestures of pinching and panning to move the view around. But on the desktop version, you have a bunch of different options for controlling the view. You can use the arrow keys to pan the view up and down. You can use the command up and down keys to zoom in and out. So on Windows, that would be control up and down. And on your laptop, if you're using a Mac with a trackpad, you can use two-finger gestures there also to pinch and zoom. So the first thing I'm going to do is position the midline. And as you can see, there's a proportion guide that's locked to the midline, and I can just shift it down to where I want it to be on this patient. And I'm going to use these corner control points to adjust the width of the guide, and this one to adjust the height. As you can see, when I'm adjusting the width or the height of the golden proportion guide, it's showing me the proportion of the central in that box. So I can define the guide in terms of ideal proportions for the centrals, and the other segments of it are basically showing me the red proportion. Once I'm happy with that, I want to lock these guides into position so I don't accidentally move them later on. And to do that, I'm going to use this layer editor on the right side of the screen. So right now we just have the photo, the design, which we haven't created yet, and our guides. And when I click on the icon for the guides, it gives me a little pop-up with all of the guide options and being able to switch them off and on, and also to lock them in place. So what I want to do is just click on these lock icons for the midline and the proportion guide, and that locks them into position, and I can't move them accidentally from now on. Next thing I'm going to do is bring in the smile curve guide, and as you can see, it appears at the base of the golden proportion guide. So we can use this guide to follow the lip contour of the patient, and then shift it up to use it as guidance for the incisal edges of the teeth. So I just shift it up, and I can rotate it by dragging on this handle at the top of the manip. So you see, when I select something in this editor, a box pops up with the editing controls. So we've already seen the movement handle, and these little squares allow you to scale and stretch the selected object or objects. If you drag a corner handle, it scales the object while maintaining the proportion. And if you drag an edge handle in the middle of an edge, it stretches and distorts that object in the direction that you're pulling it. And at the top there is the rotation handle, which we've already used. So now I want to lock this guide, same thing, and as you can see, it turns into a dotted line. So if I click on the patient's photo icon in the layer editor, it actually hides the photo and lets me look at my design and my guides in isolation. But now I want to switch it back on, and on the bottom of the screen you'll see the photos that are part of this case. And in this particular example, we just have the natural smile and the retracted picture. And since we set up that correspondence at the beginning, we can actually toggle back and forth between these two pictures and use them both in the treatment planning. So we took our lip curve from the natural smile. We have the lip information in the retracted view, so we can actually design the teeth in this view, and then when we're ready to do the simulation, we can switch back to that and do the simulation on the natural smile picture. Now that we've set up our guides, we're ready to actually start designing the teeth. To do that, we're going to import a template. So on the left edge of the screen here, there's a button that says Import Teeth. And when I click on that, I get a pop-up with our different categories of library teeth. So the classic template has templates for the lower teeth, for the occlusal view, and some of these classic contours for the oval, triangular, rectangular, and square. And we also have some natural tooth contours from the Dr. Jan Heito's Anteriors collection. So I'm going to just pick the F1 template for this case. And when I click on it, the teeth are imported into our design. So when I import the teeth, they come in already selected with that transform box around them, so I can actually move the teeth around and position them at the midline. And if I drag one of these corner handles, I can resize the teeth to match with the proportion guide that we're looking for. Now if I click on empty space or tap on empty space if you're on the iPad, it deselects the teeth. And if I click on just one tooth, it becomes selected. And if I want to select more than one, then I drag a box from some empty space and make it cross over the group that I want to select. So if I want to select all of these teeth, I just drag a box around them and I can do whatever I want to them. Since I'm happy with the centrals the way they've been set up already, the next thing I want to do is basically select the next teeth and do these basic adjustments to make them fit within the proportion that I'm looking for on this case. And I can just keep going like that with the rest of the teeth. Now if I just select one tooth, you'll see this object editor appear at the top of the screen, and that tells you the tooth width and height as well as its proportion. So if I wanted centrals that fit a particular aspect ratio, I could actually just type that value at the top of the screen and hit enter, and it would adjust the teeth to match that proportion. So the next thing I want to do is make this smile symmetric, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to just select the teeth on this side and I'm going to delete them. So on the left side of the screen, you'll see the various tools that are available to me. I'm in the select tool, and that's really a select and edit tool. And there are a bunch of actions that are available here while I'm in the select tool. And when I have some teeth selected, they become enabled. So the bottom one is what I'm going to do to get rid of those teeth. And if I want to duplicate these teeth and mirror them across the midline, I just hit the mirror icon here. And now I have a symmetric smile. Now I'm not a dentist, so the way I design this would be very different than what you would do. But hopefully this gives you an idea about the tool itself and give you inspiration to get started and do the designs yourself. So I'm just gonna adjust these teeth a little bit. If I wanted to adjust or create more teeth, let's say premolars and molars, I could basically select one of these teeth and duplicate it. And duplicating just makes a copy without mirroring it across the midline. So I can actually take the copy and make adjustments to it. And maybe I want to mirror it as well across the midline and move it into position. And I can switch back to the natural smile picture and see how that looks. And those are the basics of how to create your first design. Now I'll just quickly show you how to use the new curve tool to draw a tooth from scratch. So if I wanted to create a lower tooth, what I would do is basically switch to the new curve tool and start tapping or clicking to add points to the design. And as you can see, if I click and hold, I can position each point on the line using the magnifier. And when I'm finished, I can do two things to sort of end the line. So if I was creating a curve that was just a guideline of some kind, or some line that I want to incorporate into the design that isn't a tooth, then I would hit this done button and I would leave the tooth open. But because I'm drawing a tooth here and I want it to be treated as a tooth in simulation, I'm actually going to hit the close button. And when you say close, it's asking us to identify what tooth we just drew. And that helps it to participate in simulation and actually look like the tooth that we expect. So we have the upper teeth here. And obviously we just created a lower tooth, so I'm going to click here to access the lower teeth and select the right one from the diagram here, and you see it turns blue when you select a tooth, and then I say accept, and we're back in the select tool, and we can actually select this tooth and we can make adjustments to it now. Now if I wanted to edit the tooth point by point, I activate this mode at the top of the action list, and now it switches back to the original points that I created, and I can move them around and make changes, or I can click on edit points again and switch to this transform mode. And if I accidentally left something open that I meant to close, then there's the close icon here, so you can always toggle that back and forth, and you can always re-identify the tooth after the fact. In this particular case, I'm not going to do the lower, so I'm just going to select this tooth that I created and I'm going to delete it. The next thing I'm going to do is take some measurements, and these measurements can be sent to the lab to help communicate the treatment plan to the technician and get on board about what we're trying to do to make the case more predictable. So these measurements are used to guide a physical wax up. If you're working with CAD/CAM, then you're going to want to use the 3D Connect feature instead to turn this design into a transparent overlay on your screen. And that's something we'll cover in another video. So what I'm doing is I'm positioning this virtual ruler along the distance that I want to measure. And then next to the measure tool, there's one action that we could do, and that's add the measurement. And there it added a dimension to the drawing. So I'm just going to do that for a couple of teeth and using the magnifier to position this ruler in the right place and add a measurement. It's easiest to do this working your way from the right side of the screen to the left, just so you don't get an overlap between the ruler and the dimensions themselves. So after I add a dimension, I can actually make adjustments to it. So I can move the start and end points and reposition them. And I can take this label and I can move it within a certain distance away from the dimension. So depending on how you want your plan to look when you export it out to share, you might want to keep the labels in the middle of each tooth, or you might want to move them to the top, or some combination of those things. If I add an extra measurement that I don't want to keep, I can tap and hold on the number, and the red X pops up, and when I click on that X, it deletes the measurement. And you can take measurements not just of the length of the teeth, you can actually take fairly small measurements if you're doing, let's say, an additive case and you want to communicate to the lab technician how much you're adding to the centrals in length. You can take very small measurements as well, and here's an example of that. So I'm using the magnifier here, positioning it, and saying add. And I can continue to tweak these things and reposition them. And that's it for the measurements. If we wanted to look at them in isolation with the design without the photo appearing underneath, then we would just toggle it off. And this might be something that you would save out at the export step and send it to your lab technician. But before we do that, we're going to create a simulation for this case. So I'm going to switch back to the natural smile picture, and obviously I want to hide these measurements when I'm doing the simulation. So you can see when we created the first measurement, it automatically created a layer to keep all of them. And when I click on that layer, it'll toggle it off. So that's where we want to be to set up the simulation. We also want to delete or hide the guides. So I'm going to switch off this toggle at the top of the guides list and hide the whole layer. And this is where you want to be when you're starting your simulation. So just looking at the patient's smiling face and the design that we created. And to do the simulation, we just kick into the simulation tool. And as you can see, all the teeth have been filled in, and we have this red outline. And what that is the mask area that we're going to define for the interior of the mouth, and that'll tell the software how to cut the virtual teeth so that they actually appear to be inside the mouth. So if I click on empty space in this line, it's going to add detail. And similarly, if I click on a point without moving it, just click and release, it's going to remove the detail from the line. So now I'm just going to step through and position these points along the interior of the mouth. And along the bottom of the screen here, you'll see a control area that lets you define this lip shadow effect, which we're using to sort of help the virtual teeth blend into the mouth a little bit better. And it also helps you to see how well the lip mask is defined and whether you need to make any adjustments so that it looks realistic and is actually cutting our simulation teeth the way they would if they were inside the mouth. And once we're happy with our lip mask, we hit this check mark button. And now we're in the simulation tool, and we have some options on the bottom here. But when we're in the simulation tool, we can also select the teeth and make a special adjustment. So unlike in the select tool, when we're in the simulation tool and we select a tooth, the thing that we're adjusting with this transform box is not the tooth curve that we defined earlier, but it's actually the picture of tooth material that is being cut to the shape that we defined in our design. So if I move this around, you'll see what's happening. I'm actually adjusting the texture material for the tooth, and it's getting cut to the shape that we designed. So in some situations, you might have something that looks like this, in which case it means that the tooth texture is stretched to be way too big. So what you want to do is you want to take this adjustment, this transform scale, and you'll want to drag it in until the tooth is just barely crossing the boundary of the curve that you designed and doesn't have any gaps. And that'll help you achieve a much more realistic simulation result. So we just scale these up when we need to, and if we don't need to, we don't do anything. If the teeth are stacking in the wrong order, like you see here, what we can do is we can switch to the select tool, and we click on the teeth in order from the backmost to the frontmost, and that'll resolve those stacking issues and make sure that the teeth are overlapping in the right way. Now we're going to switch back to the simulation tool, and we're going to do some basic whitening adjustments. So if I click on the whitening icon, I get this panel of effects that I can apply. So first is generally a whitening slider, so I can keep the teeth natural looking, or I can crank up the whiteness, or be somewhere in between. The highlight slider allows me to adjust how shiny the teeth are. So this is meant to help you match the conditions that the patient photo was taken in. If you took the photo with something like an iPad, you're not going to get a lot of specular reflections on their face, and you wouldn't expect to on the teeth either. If you didn't use a strong external flash. So you would dial this highlight slider way down to have the simulation teeth sort of match the face. But since this picture was taken with an external, actually dual flashes, we crank up the highlights all the way, and that helps us to look more realistic in the mouth. Finally, the brightness is just an adjustment where you can match the lighting conditions in the room. So you can make an brightness adjustment globally, or the brightness is actually one effect that you can apply to the teeth individually. So if I select a tooth, a premolar, I can actually lower the brightness on just that tooth. And when I'm happy with the whitening and color adjustments that I've made, I hit the checkmark button. And the last simulation tool that we're going to use just to cover the basics is the smudge. So I activate the smudge tool and I adjust the brush size. So what the smudge tool does is it lets us drag pink or reddish pixels on the patient photo, and allows us in certain cases to shorten the patient's teeth and basically get their existing teeth out of the way so that the simulation can come through and be seen clearly. So in order to use it, I just define the brush size, and I just drag down from an area of pink, and it smudges that area across tooth material. So I'm just quickly go through the gingiva. If the smile is closed and all you have under your virtual teeth on the incisal edge is the lower teeth, the smudge tool might not work out very well for you. But in this case, the smile is fairly open, so I'm able to do quite a bit with the smudge tool. If you make a mistake, you're going to want to undo. So the undo redo is at the top right of your screen. And with the smudge, it's actually very, very easy to pull the wrong thing and make it look weird. So if you get in that situation, just hit undo and try it again. If you want to start the whole smudging process over again, you can hit this reset button at the bottom of your screen. And when we're done, we just hit the check mark. And if we have any other adjustments, we want to make, we can still make them after the fact. So if I switch back to the select tool and I'm not happy with this tooth, even after I started the simulation, I can still make adjustments to the teeth and click through to sort of fix the stacking order. And in the layer editor, I can basically toggle the design curves and the simulation off and on. So I can always switch back to the design and make changes to it. And I can switch the simulation off and on whenever I like once it's set up. So if we show this to the patient and they aren't happy with what we've designed, maybe they feel that the teeth should be longer or shorter, we can actually make adjustments after the fact, even when we have the simulation in place. So we can sort of play with it live and come up with the result that makes the patient happy, and then work backward from that and use it to guide our treatment. So the only other tool that we haven't discussed in the simulation is the photo. So if we click on the photo, we can actually select from different materials that are derived from the template that we imported. So every template from Anteriors has its corresponding natural tooth texture, which we use by default. But once you have your simulation set up, you can actually keep your tooth geometry but select a completely different look for the teeth from a different template. So if I imported F1 but I want the teeth to look like F15, then I can actually select that texture and say OK, and now we have different texture to the teeth. Now the whitening adjustments that we made that made sense for maybe for a different template wouldn't make sense for this one, so we can make our adjustments. And as before, when we're in the simulation tool, we can still tweak the position of the pictures, and if we want to go back, we can just hit photo, select F1 again, switch it back, and fix the whitening, and we're back to where we were before. So there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of variation that you can achieve with the simulation just by using different source photos and different parameters on the whitening and the brightness. So that's it for our first design. There are other controls that we haven't covered that I would encourage you to explore. So if I have some teeth selected, there are a couple of line style and color controls at the bottom right of the screen. So if I click on this little color palette, I can choose different line colors. And if I click on the icon next to it, I can actually control the line thickness and really go crazy with it if I want to. And also line styles. So I can make the lines dotted or dashed, and this is helpful if you have multiple sets of lines on the design. For instance, if you trace the existing teeth and you have the proposal and maybe you have some ortho movement depicted in the design, you can separate those multiple sets of lines using line styles and line colors. So finally, before we finish up this video, we're going to export some pictures. To do that, we click on the hamburger icon and we go to our export step. And when we arrive at the export step, we just have one panel, a single panel layout. And this layer icon lets us control what's visible in this panel. So the export works like what you see is what you get. So we would set up our view in exactly the way that we would want the picture to be saved out. And in this pop-up, I can basically control what's being included in the design in the export, and I could save out whatever image I want. Typically, you would export one picture without the simulation and with the measurements, and maybe we go on the retracted view and really zoom in, and this might be what you would send to the lab. And for the patient facing part of it, we can select the horizontal layout, and we can save out a before and after. So on the left side of the screen, it already selected just the photo with everything else switched off. And on the right side of the screen, we can select the smiling picture and the simulation with the design curves off. And this is an example of what you might save and maybe print out as part of a motivational prescription or package that you let the patient take home, or you might show them on your screen or include it in some kind of a keynote or PowerPoint presentation. So when I hit the save button, it shows me a preview of the picture that'll get saved. And I can scroll through to control the size of the picture that's getting saved out. So if you want it to be something smaller, it tells you the number of pixels that you're going to be saving out. And you can decide whether you want to save out a JPEG or a PNG, and then you just hit the export button. If you're on desktop and you click export, it's just going to give you a file browser and let you pick where the file gets saved out. On iPad, you can choose to save to Dropbox or to the iPad photo library. So it's a little bit different on a mobile device compared to a desktop. And that's pretty much it. So thanks for watching, and please give us a shout if you have any questions. You can email support@tastytech.ca, and we'll be happy to help you. Thank you for watching, and good luck designing your first case.